and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. The book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. From that same page, you can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through that worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from the use of these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your App Store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process. And it contains a copy of the Drag-On Kling-On game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. Secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we would appreciate you doing so. You can send me an email at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, or you can email Jeanie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment from you, we'll address it on the Internet show, and then as time allows, we'll send you a notification about what day and time that occurred so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or your input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody chooses to do that, because it makes it far easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be a service, and that's just a whole lot easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. And if you're listening to us at live.needle.com/mindshiftersradio, we're glad you're here and you can listen, and we're grateful to have your ears, and we welcome input from you through an email. However, if you'd like to contact us more directly, you'll have to download the Needle app, N-E-D-L AI Radio Tuner, from your App Store. Log in, give them some basic information, follow our show, and then every time we go live, they'll send you a notification to your phone, and you'll be able to open the app, and then you'll have the option to type in a comment or click on the phone icon and talk to us directly, voice to voice, which is another real good way to improve the quality of these shows. The vast majority of these shows that have been chosen as highlight shows or, quote, best of, close quotes, shows are the result of people just like you calling in and asking a question or making a comment or giving a testimonial or even bringing up an objection or refuting something that we have been talking about. So please consider doing that and let us know either with an email or if you have Michael or Jeannie's number, a text message letting them know if you have difficulty sorting out working with the app and or connecting with us through a comment or a phone call. As I listened back to yesterday's show, editing it, it's quite a rocky ride, a rough road. It's lots of background noise, changes in volume, dropping of the audio, and I will continue to send notifications to the developers of the app to let them know our experiences. And as a result, I just want to extend gratitude to anybody who continues to listen, even though it is quite a challenge at times, because it's not nearly as smooth and high quality as we would like to have it be. And we're working on it, and we will see what changes we can make in the hardware and what changes the developers might make in the software so that quality just continues to improve. So thanks for your patience as we're working through that. I just had another person who has been listening to the old archives of the show, and she asked me if the shows we're doing now are getting posted anywhere. And my answer is yes, they are now, ever since a week ago last Friday, they're getting posted to most podcast platforms. So if you have an Apple phone, you've got a podcast app on your phone. If you tap on the purple podcast app on your phone and search for Mind Shifters Radio, you'll see a picture of Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce. When you tap on that and follow it, you can get access to, I don't know exactly how many. They're constantly increasing as they're uploading older shows, but there's over 1,000 episodes. And so that same thing is true if you go to Amazon and look for Amazon's podcast platform, or if you go to Spotify and look at the Spotify podcast. You can follow us on any of those platforms and get access to the archives. The way it works on the Apple podcast app is that when you click on the three dots in the upper right-hand corner, it drops down a menu, and if you say go to the show, then it'll take you back to a list of all of the loaded episodes. So you can scroll down and literally go back years and pick a show to listen to. And then, of course, as we are able to do so each day after the show is done, we get the recording, we edit it a bit. When we have time in our day, we upload it, and then it gets published. So it may be available later today, or it may be available tomorrow for listening to it again through your podcast platform of choice. So please, let us know how we can support you. Let us know if you have questions. Let us know if you have difficulty accessing either the live show or the archives. And we will continue to do the work that we can to make it higher quality. So today we have plenty of time for comments or questions, feedback about the reading I've been doing with commentary as I've been reading through the book of Course in Miracles, published by Alan Cohen, written and published by Alan Cohen, and it was published earlier last year. As far as I know, it's his most recent effort at writing. And as I mentioned, it's now one of 3 books of his that I listen to. The other 2 are A Course in Miracles Made Easy and The Tao Made Easy. And the point of all of this is to help us understand what are the dynamics that underlie or that give power to the tools we use, like the Reality Management Worksheet or the targeted journaling that Michael Ryce calls the Mind Shifter tool. How is that effective? How does it make anything different? And of course, if we were to believe what our culture teaches us when it says things like, "You're making me angry," "You're hurting my feelings," "You're scaring me," if we believe those descriptions, then the Reality Management Worksheet would be pointless. Because if I'm only angry because someone or something outside of me says or does something I don't like, then me doing a worksheet about my internal experience is pointless. The best use of my energy is to try and force or manipulate or bribe or seduce the person outside of me to change what they're doing. Because if what they're doing is causing my upset, then me doing a worksheet about it is pointless. The good news is the actual mechanism that creates any emotional state I experience is happening inside me, and I have access to the dynamics that create it. It's happening inside me because of the choice I'm making about how to interpret and then choose a response to whatever my senses are telling me, or whatever picture I'm creating from what my senses are telling me. And if I understand that that's the actual dynamic that creates my emotions and my interpretation of and my response to life events, then a tool like the Reality Management Worksheet can be highly effective. So when we're reading, whether it's a book by Guy Finley, and one of the books that we read by him years ago was his Relationship Magic book. And we read about this wonderful spiritual teacher who has studied people and emotions and relationships for decades, and he's also studied spiritual teachings from various sources for decades, and he combined that into the book Relationship Magic. So we read that book, and we read it with commentary, and then we had Guy Finley grace us with an actual interview about his book. And so the same dynamics that each one of us use to create the emotions we experience in a relationship, talked about from a slightly different perspective. And some people really resonate with Guy Finley and his storytelling and his long-winded sentences, and others not so much. So when we're done with that, we move on to someone like Dale Allen Hoffman or one of Dr. Michael Ryce's lectures or perspectives on it, or Michael Singer, or The Course in Miracles, or The Way of Mastery, or Christian Sundberg and his book, A Walk in the Physical. The point of which is to help each one of us begin to question and explore what is the actual process within each of us that creates our experience of life in each moment. And when we understand more about that process, then we're better equipped to make the decisions that only we can make in our lives. And it's the result of those decisions that we make in our lives that either make our lives more peaceful, more loving, more satisfying, more gratitude-based, or makes our lives more irritated and upset and blame-focused, fear-based, etc. And the core of the teachings that we like to present can be summarized best by some of the quotes from Course in Miracles and Way of Mastery. Choose love over fear. Continually, soon and often in your life, identify how what you might be feeling is being driven by a set of interpretations about life that then, if you believe them and pour your mind energy into them, they generate upset for you. They generate anger, or they generate fear, or they generate sadness, or hurt, or confusion. And then you take a breath and you say, I wonder, do I prefer generating this emotion of confusion, or would I like to choose differently? If I become aware of the dynamics that drive that process, if I become aware of my options for choice in different areas, now I've got a wider range of options available to me, and I've got the empowered perspective that comes from understanding what's happening at the level of cause, C-A-U-S-E. Not the level of effect, but the level of cause, the origin of the dynamic that creates my experience. So again, please feel free to type in a comment. Or tap on the phone icon to raise a hand to speak directly to me. And please feel free to do that even if I've gone back to the reading with commentary or I seem to be in a monologue. I welcome your input. So where I was reading in the yesterday and the day before from the book Of Course in Miracles by Alan Cohen, he was talking about how giving and receiving are the same. And this is not a zero-sum game. It's not like there's only 100 units of love that everybody gets in a day. And if I give away my units of love, I'm left with nothing for myself. That's not the way things work. If you want to feel loved, go out and extend your true nature of love to others. Give it away, as the Red Hot Chili Peppers would say. Give it away, give it away, give it away now. And you will have the experience of it more deeply and more richly. Where we'd left off, he was talking about how Jesus is quoted as saying, "Judge not so that you are not judged." And Alan writes, most people interpret this teaching as saying, if you judge someone now, later on you're going to be judged by God or by life or whatever. And Alan writes, the dynamic is much simpler. When you judge a person or an event, you drop into the consciousness of judgment. And this is just like what the Way of Mastery says in Lesson 3. The Way of Mastery says, if you understood what happens in your energy system, even in your body, when you judge, Way of Mastery says, the very cellular structure in your body stops functioning. Nutrition doesn't get in, worn out parts aren't repaired. Judgment is destructive at any level. And that's what Alan Cohen is pointing to here. He says, the dynamic is much simpler. Whenever you judge a person or event, you drop into the consciousness of judgment. It's a state of mind in which everything is condemnable, including yourself. We reap the kind of results of whatever kind of vision we choose to see the world, for better or worse. So if we see the world as angry and bitter and dangerous, and we generate fear around it, then we see ourselves in that same way. If we see the world as full of love and beauty and compassion, we understand that's in us as well. He says we might paraphrase Jesus' teaching to say, quote, when we hold grievances against the world, we automatically hold grievances against ourselves. Close quotes. And of course, your ego will attempt to exclude you from the grievances that you're generating by projecting them out into your image of other people. And yet, the guilt from that process still has its grip on you. The only way to escape judgment is to release judgment from within yourself. Release judgment of the world and others. And then he quotes A Course in Miracles from the workbook, lesson 198, where it says, quote, only my condemnation injures me. Only my own forgiveness sets me free. Close quotes. Alan goes on and says, the Course offers a striking metaphor. When you keep someone in the prison of your judgments, you have to sit at the door of their cell to make sure they do not escape. And then he quotes the workbook, lesson 198, and says, a jailer is not free, for he is bound together with his prisoner. He must be sure that he does not escape, and so the jailer spends his time keeping watch on the prisoner. The bars that limit him become the world in which his jailer also lives, along with him. And it is in his freedom that the way to liberty depends for both of them. That's from the Course in Miracles, the workbook, lesson 198. It says 3-6. Alan goes on and says, your gifts to the world are your gifts to yourself. And there's a line, of Course in Miracles, from the textbook that says, quote, to have, give all to all. The more you give away, the more you get it. Close quotes. Alan writes, you cannot outgive creation or God. For as much as you give, there is more in store for you to give to others and receive for yourself. The more you focus on an idea, the larger it grows. When you recognize the blessings you already own, they expand. Your Creator does not want anyone to be depressed, guilty, or fearful. Those are all attributes of the world the ego has manufactured. While many people are helped by prescription antidepressants, the most powerful antidepressant is love. One of my coaching clients reported that she daily visited her father in the hospital. She had brought him an aromatherapy unit to diffuse healing scents into the room. And she asked Alan, quote, is there anything else I could do for him? Alan replied, you are the master diffuser. When you enter his presence with joy and genuine love in your heart, You are diffusing high vibrations that go far beyond the mechanical diffuser and what it is radiating. Close quotes. Giving and receiving love are the same. You cannot give love without receiving it. You cannot receive love without giving it. Jesus did not wince when he gave love, and neither do we. The entire Course in Miracles is a gift of love, and the more we practice it, the more love there is in the world for all of us. And for those who may not have been here, yesterday when we were reading this lesson, Alan talked about a movie that was made ostensibly about the life of Jesus, and in that movie, they portrayed Jesus as going through pain or experiencing pain every time he healed someone, as though he was taking their pain onto himself. And the dynamic that is expressed in these higher spiritual teachings is that's not how it works. That the healing happens inside the person, and the healing energy comes from outside of us and inside of us and through us, and we are not I'm trying to remember the movie. I think it was The Green Mile. There was a gentleman who was the center of that movie who was able to take other people's pain, and they portrayed that as actual dark mist or almost like a swarm of flies that would leave the person who was getting healed, but it would be absorbed by the person who was doing the healing. And Alan's trying to point out that that's not the teaching from Way of Mastery or Course in Miracles or many other higher spiritual teachings. And that is that you are whole and complete just as you are, and so is everyone else that you're dealing with. And when you change what you're doing with your own mind energy, and you change and rearrange the flow of energy so that it is restored to its natural order, healing happens for many people. And if you change your interpretation of and response to physical ailments you might have and mental emotional impairments that you might be experiencing, that is the process that changes your experience. Even if the physical body doesn't heal instantaneously, the suffering can end instantaneously. So the physical sensations may still be there, and yet your mind, your soul, your heart, your energy system is free to radiate out compassion, love, joy, connection, commitment. Much like what we've talked about a number of times, Roger McGowan, who was sentenced to death row in Texas for a crime he didn't commit, instead of choosing bitterness and resentment, he chose for love. He chose to become a spiritual teacher. And so his experience of being locked away in a 6-foot by 6-foot by 10-foot cell became dramatically different than the people who were in the cells next to him or down the aisle from him, because he didn't choose to focus his mind energy on anger and bitterness and resentment. He chose to focus his mind energy on forgiveness and love and joy and compassion, and he literally became a spiritual teacher for thousands of people, even though his own circumstances externally weren't changing. So at the end of this chapter, Alan Cohen offers miraculous insights, he calls them. And again, please feel free to type a comment or raise a hand in the app to let me know that you want to talk. The first miraculous insight that he offers is the question, have you ever felt depressed? And if so, what helped free you? His next question is, do you ever argue with your spouse or someone else about money? And the third question is, if you do argue with your spouse or someone else about money, what thoughts of lack and not having enough are fueling your arguments? The next question is, what thoughts of abundance would release your fear of lack and end your argument? The next question is, what is the difference between the gifts of the ego and the gifts of the spirit? Next question is, if you are a teacher or healer, do you ever feel depleted or drained after teaching or healing? And next he asks, what belief do you hold that implies you must lose in order for someone else to gain? The next question is, would you be willing to question or challenge your belief in sacrifice and replace it with a win-win model? The next question is, how do your judgments keep you in prison? And the next question is, how does your forgiveness free you? Now, in this work, our definition for forgiveness is the active process of dismantling judgment and perception. It is the tool that Michael Ryce likes to talk about it from the ancient Aramaic for removing anything that is less than love from your energy system. And in the way of mastery, it talks about learning to identify the process of judgment and understand that it is a constriction, a contraction, and what Michael Ryce would call a disintegrative energy. And when we release our judgments, when we dismantle our perceptions, when we ask to be shown the absolute capital T truth of life as it's unfolding in front of us, we benefit. We benefit instantaneously if we're willing to use the process of forgiveness to dismantle everything that's less than love from inside our energy system. And the good news here is we don't need to wait for anyone or anything else to do that process. We can do it within ourselves. And Michael Ryce offers the Reality Management Worksheet as a step-by-step model for that. And a short introduction to that is available on the mindshiftersacademy.org website on the page titled Educational Material. And the first 3 or 4 links on that page are about the mental short version of the Reality Management Worksheet, which is a process I use to introduce people to this powerful dynamic, this powerful tool. And so if you want to go to the mindshiftersacademy.org website and click on the page that says Educational Material, everything you need to get introduced to the Reality Management Worksheet, which is basically a tool to dismantle judgment and perception, especially when they lead to what most people would experience as a negative emotional state. Tightness, tension, anger, upset, hurt, confusion, overwhelm, grief, etc. So back to the book of Course in Miracles, Ellen Cohen offers this affirmation at the end of that last chapter. I elevate myself by choosing thoughts of abundance and generosity. My teaching and my healing empowers me along with my students and clients. Releasing others is my gift to myself as well as to them. So again, comments or questions are welcome. We have the Needle app, N-E-D-L. If you open that up from your app store and log in and answer a few questions, then you'll have the option to type a comment or actually raise a hand to be a caller. If you're listening at live.needle.com/mindshifterradio, we're glad you're here, but you don't have access to the comment section or the call-in section. In lieu of someone raising a hand or texting me or sending an email, I will move on to the 14th chapter of this book, titled Of Course in Miracles, When Love Becomes a Way of Life. And this lesson is titled, How Long Would You Like to Be Happy For? And there's a series of statements before he gets into the actual text of this chapter. He says, if you want to be happy for an hour, take a nap. If you want to be happy for a day, go fishing. If you want to be happy for a month, get married. If you want to be happy for a year, inherit a fortune. If you want to be happy for a lifetime, help someone. Alan writes, this is an ancient Chinese proverb that captures the heart of A Course in Miracles. He writes, the happiness the world provides is fleeting. Peace depends on outer events and goes as quickly as it came. Yet there is another kind of peace that lasts forever. And Jesus is quoted as saying, my peace I give unto you, not as the world gives, give I unto you. Close quotes. This is from John, the Gospel of John 14:27. And then Alan writes, whatever the world gives goes away. What God gives, what the Creator gives, lives for eternity. And then he quotes the Course in Miracles textbook as saying, and truth stands radiant apart from conflict, untouched and quiet in the peace of God. Alan writes, if we want the peace of the Creator, we have to focus exclusively on it. Divided attention undermines reaching the goal. You can't immerse yourself in war, horror, or crime movies, or the news, which he says in parentheses is the same thing. You can't focus on those things and retain the peace of God. He quotes A Course in Miracles. The notation here says M11 something, so I'm trying to figure out in the Course in Miracles, there's the textbook, there's the workbook, and maybe this M is for the manual for teachers. And there's a quote from the manual for teachers 11.4:1. He says, quote, peace is impossible to those who look on war, close quotes. Alan writes, I know people who sat and watched the news constantly during the COVID pandemic, and they became nervous wrecks. I also know people who meditated constantly during the pandemic, and they became a force for healing. There is an even more subtle teaching here. It's not movies or the news or annoying people that remove our peace. The real culprits are the judgments we hold when we look upon those people and events. And it's the fears we generate within ourselves. He says the fears we indulge. He writes, it is possible to look upon anything the world shows us, no matter how dark or grisly, and maintain our peace if we are committed to it. Conflict in the world is a projection of the conflict we perceive within ourselves. If we wish to stop wars on earth, we must first stop the wars in our own minds. And I know that this is a teaching from deep spiritual traditions that cuts across cultures and time. And I also know there are people who argue against this. And people who tell me on a regular basis they think I have my head stuck in the sand and that I'm just in denial about all the horrible things that are going on in the world. I, on the other hand, have a different view. And I don't know who to thank. My parents, God, light, love, happenstance. I'm just lucky to have stumbled across different teachers throughout my career. And yet, I have the view that says, in any given moment, when I can look out and see violent, destructive things going on, hate-filled people raging, I can see wars in the news, I can hear stories of people who are being rounded up to be deported. In any given moment when all of those things are happening, wildfires wiping out whole towns on various states, that's all happening. And in that same moment are times many more things happening on this planet that are loving, that are extending peace, that are based in gratitude, that are loving. I used to tell people, if you could know every single thing that's going on in the town you live in, all the good, all the neutral, all the horrible stuff, you'd be filled with hope and joy and compassion and gratitude. Because the good far outweighs the bland and the neutral and the negative. And as a result of that, for decades now, I've been encouraging people in my family and my friends and my caseload, please quit sucking on what they call the news. Whether it's these days on your phone or on the TV or on the radio, it's not news, it's just the worst of the worst stuff, the most dramatic, the most destructive, the most hurtful stuff from around the globe. And it's all focused and brought to you, and you can suck on it and just ingest it all day long, whether it's from a radio station or a television or on the internet or on your phone. And my point to people is, if you're hearing about all these things that are happening across the globe, across the continent you live on, and you don't have billions of dollars to donate and mobilize, buy trucks and mobilize them to go, bring food and clothes and people have lost their homes. If you don't have those kinds of resources, why are you focusing on all these things you have no capacity to affect directly? And you, in that same moment, you do have the capacity to choose for love within yourself, to choose for peace, to radiate out love, to do something loving for somebody that lives in your own community. Not too long ago, a town 3 towns away from where I'm living, there was a fire in a homeless encampment. And there were people, just human beings just like me, with different life circumstances, that relied on the tents and the sleeping bags and the stacks of, cardboard boxes that were, a couple feet wide to be an insulator. They relied on that for their survival in the winter. And all of a sudden they had a need. Now, if I get in my car and I drive down there and I give somebody some money, or I bring some old blankets that aren't getting used, or I bring, the coat that I replaced with a better coat a couple of years ago, but the old coat's still in my closet. If I take it down there and donate it to those people and ask them what they need and maybe spend a few hours as a volunteer, I am nurtured and nourished. I feel better. They're grateful. I get to strengthen my core from that energy exchange. But if I sit in my house and I read that story on the news, and I read other stories about people in Gaza and people in the Sudan and people various places around the globe where they don't have enough food and somebody's throwing hate speech at them and somebody's restricting their rights, and I just generate the negativity and the fear and the helplessness that comes from focusing on things I have no control over, then I'm not giving loving, creative, productive energy out into the field around me, and I'm not doing what little I can do with the limited resources I have at a physical level. And so I'm not going to be moving forward in a loving way. I'm not going to feel good about myself. I'm going to be, as Alan Cohen was talking about in this book, creating the mindset that leads me to feeling depressed and overwhelmed. Creating the mindset that leads me to believe I lack things and other people lack things. And in all of this work, all of these teachings, we are inviting people to change that internal dynamic. What are you focusing on? What are you doing with your mind energy? What are you doing with the few physical resources that you have? And are you extending them lovingly to yourself and others? Or are you hoarding from a sense of lack and fear? So let us know, how's this landing for you? Have you had your own experiences where you've shifted the focus of your attention and your awareness, when you've shifted the focus back to the few things you have control over and used them to help yourself and others? Has it been, as Alan Cohen has suggested, an antidote for depression or fear or anger or grief? So Alan goes on in this book, of Course in Miracles. He writes, an advanced soul could stand in the middle of a battleground and remain at peace. He writes, during a war in Lebanon, Mother Teresa learned of a children's hospital in Beirut that was threatened by gunfire and bombs. He says, this saintly soul announced that she and a group of her nuns would drive into that city to rescue the children and transport them to a safe location. When the warring factions learned of her mission, they declared a ceasefire. He writes, I was amazed as I watched a video of Mother Teresa leading a caravan of Red Cross trucks through the streets of the city. Soldiers from the opposing armies stood silently with their guns lowered. When the nuns had accomplished their task, they drove out of the cities, and the silliness returned. The armies went back to fighting. He writes, Mother Teresa's consciousness was so well established in the well-being and the compassion and the trust that she created a psychic sphere of safety around her staff and the children. She literally stopped a war. And then he quotes the manual for teachers, I suppose it is, from the Way of Mastering, misspoke. From the Course in Miracles, he quotes it as saying, quote, what else but a thought of God turns hell to heaven merely by being what it is? The earth bows down before its gracious presence, and it leans down in answer to raise it up again, close quotes. Another line from the Manual for Teachers says, peace is inevitable to those who offer peace. And my mind says, and you might have to offer it many times before those around you recognize their ability to do the same. I've been in a number of situations where I went in offering peace and I was greeted with irritation, frustration, blame, etc. In those situations where I turned to myself and got centered and refused to buy into the story that others were offering me, it eventually, my peace returned, is the best way to say that. I have the capacity to create my experience of life in each new present moment. And I do that with the infinite capacity I have to choose the focus of my conscious awareness in that moment. So choose wisely, because the choice of what you focus on, the choice to either hoard or give, the choice for love over fear, is literally the force that creates, and the choice that creates your experience of life. Alan writes, we are founded in peace. Not only do you not see war when you are founded in peace, you are also invisible to those who choose war. He writes, my friend Keith was sitting in a fast food restaurant with his friend, talking about consciousness and experience. And Keith said to his buddy, quote, if we were firmly established in a peaceful state of mind, that building right next to us could blow up and we would not even notice it. Minutes later, the two men were interrupted by policemen storming their table and ordering them to stand and be frisked. While the two men had been immersed in their spiritual conversation, two crooks had robbed the restaurant at gunpoint. All the other customers ran out, but Keith and his friend were so deeply engaged in their higher consciousness discussions, they weren't even aware of the robbery. And the thieves didn't even see them. They were absorbed in a reality that was completely discontinuous from the one in which there was a robbery and potential violence or danger. Alan writes, peace does not fight war. peace simply remains itself. And in so doing, it undoes war. And he quotes from the workbook in Course in Miracles where it says, quote, "So does the ego do constant battle with the Holy Spirit about what your happiness is. It is not a two-way battle. The ego attacks, and the Holy Spirit does not respond." Close quotes. Alan writes, "The ego's thoughts are based on attack, whether we see ourselves as attacked or attacking, and the Holy Spirit's thoughts are founded on forgiveness and release. We win the battles of life not by getting rid of our opponents, but by walking off the battlefield." When Mother Teresa was invited to speak at an anti-war rally, she declined. She explained, quote, "Fighting war is just another form of war." She went on to say, quote, "If this were a pro-peace rally, I would gladly participate." And then he writes from the workbook, Lesson 23, from the Course in Miracles, he writes, quote, "I can escape from the world I see by giving up attack thoughts. I can escape from the world I see by giving up attack thoughts." I'll leave us with this. The ancient Aramaic work that Dr. Michael Ryce and the Kabors manuscript team had done gave us the definition for humility, which is this ability to look for and see the highest and best in another, and then choose to cooperate only with that highest and best. So I might have somebody in front of me who's raging, who's hurling insults, who's threatening violence, and if I have the humility, I don't think that I'm less than this person. I understand that we are all the same, and I'm able to look and see their being of brilliance and light, which they have either temporarily forgotten or yet to discover, and I can then choose to cooperate only with that highest and best potential that is there in the person in front of me. So I thank you for being here today, listening. I will remind people that as this show ends, you'll have to open up your app again when Michael and Jeanie come on. I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. And I offer you blessings and peace.